value in having that kind of healthy mix. I think what we're hearing from many people who complain about the overemphasis on external or licensed IP is that we don't have that balance, right? We don't have, or at least what we think is a healthy balance. As someone mentioned before, there are benefits to licenses or external IP, right? It does have the potential to open up new markets because someone may be a fan of Harry Potter but doesn't really play many games, but now they'll pick up the DS or PlayStation just so they can continue enjoying that universe. And now we kind of brought someone new into the fold. Yeah.
There's a much bigger spend as well, marketing spend.
Right. You certainly, and I think it was mentioned earlier as well, there is an offset there that, the book publisher, the movie studio will certainly put tons of money behind promoting Harry Potter, and as a game company, sure, you got to do a little bit of promo, but you kind of ride the coattails of that massive amount of marketing. So you certainly kind of take advantage there. The other thing, of course, is although we talked about some of the problems in terms of timing and quality issues, as developers, working on an external IP should not be an excuse to do bad work. Right? I mean, some developers, that's what they do. So, it's not my idea, it's not my property, I don't own it, so we're just going to kind of do some rubbish and get it out the door. And that's hurting yourselves, it's hurting the whole industry. And so, if we actually did a better job with these things, despite the constraints. And one of the most important things is those more predictable revenues from external IP, in theory, should help fund the somewhat more unpredictable development of new original or internal IP. And this is where we're hearing, like I mentioned before, EAs of the world starting to believe in that and put some emphasis on that. And then ultimately, I would sort of suggest that this over-reliance on external IP is actually a symptom to much more fundamental issues within the game industry. So stuff like the cost and poor production practices of many game development studios is in fact what makes the games more risky. Right? I mean, obviously there's market risks that we talked about, but the fact that many studios don't have formal production methodologies, they're kind of just hacking at it, even the big established companies, largely are still just hacking at it. A lot of waste, a lot of rework, so it makes those projects last much longer and have much bigger overheads and many more staff than you actually need. And so if we actually kind of just grow as an industry and we're more mature in terms of how we produce games, producing a game would be somewhat less risky, less costly. And also this kind of over-reliance on external IP speaks to this challenge of that we have no real tools to predict the sellability of the game, right? Everyone's sort of basing it on spreadsheet management, looking at historical data. No one knew that The Sims was going to be the biggest selling game of all time. We have no tools to predict that. So, that's another one of them, and also this kind of narrow topic focus that we don't have a more diverse spread of games and so on. So it's many of these things that lead publishers or the decision makers to kind of overemphasize on external IP, and then you can kind of see that borne out in the numbers with the increased standard deviation and so on. But to some extent, if we alleviated some of those other problems, it would be kind of easier and less risky to invest in new internal IP. Yeah.
Won't the Sims data have that kind of background information? Who's buying?
Sorry?
Won't the Sims database have that kind of background information, like who's buying?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Some companies are better than others in terms of collecting sales demographics and understanding who's purchasing what game. Yeah, but I mean, it's still, we're kind of like cavemen banging the sticks together when it comes to market analysis of demographics, and we need to become much more sophisticated in that area. But there are attempts to do that, even from just a few years ago when really there was nothing. So I think we started a bit late, but I think we got a couple of minutes. That's sort of the end of my formal portion. If we want to, any questions at random, let's do ongoing discussion.
Do you think developers should think like a bit more carefully instead of just looking at licensed IPs, external licensed IPs, as sort of traditional licensed money? Do you think they should think a lot more carefully about consequences, say, seeing with a game like Chronicles of Riddick by Starbreeze, which was absolutely groundbreaking excellent game, because the film was so absolutely poor, excuse my expression. The game suffered amazingly in the sales, it wasn't incredibly
Yeah, it's an interesting point, right? When the rare occasion that the licensed game turns out to be better than the movie or whatever the license is. Yeah, I mean, again, that's sort of how can you predict that, right? I mean, what was it? The other one was Catwoman, right? I mean, that was a total bomb, but the game also sucked, I guess. But yeah, I mean, so there's certainly cases like that, and there was some interesting discussion a year or two ago in one of the was it Warner Brothers that said that they were going to penalize developers who didn't reach a certain level of game ranking or Metacritic score, and said that they were going to like lower royalty rates if you didn't make a good quality game. This was their sort of tack to get developers to make good licensed product. And so they said, if you don't hit like 80%, well then you get 20% less royalty or whatever their formula was. In the end, everyone kind of freaked out because they were going to burn down the building, and so they didn't do that. But the sort of discussion flipped. We're saying, well, what if Warner Brothers, you make a crappy movie and it hurts the sales of my game? Now you're going to like up the royalty rate to compensate for the suckiness of your movie, and so that obviously didn't go anywhere either. But it sort of is an interesting dynamic there between the two. That was a few years ago. Yeah.
What do you think about retro licenses?
Retro licenses, meaning
The ability of like old hit titles being reinvented for new platforms.
yeah, I mean, that would sort of fall into the internal IP, even though it's a license from an old property. Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, those are great games, and people still have a hunger for playing those. I mean, there's no reason why we should enable that. And actually, that ties into this idea of the long tail, right? If you just sort of put it all out there, those folks who have sort of nostalgic memories of playing those games, they'll be able to go find that online without sort of flooding the physical channel of the store shelf. Yeah.
I guess back to the long tail, because they're physical properties, that's most likely going to more people on eBay than on republic.
Right.
So that those figures aren't fed back into any place, or the profits are now going back to either the publisher or the developer. So
Yeah, all this sort of secondhand traffic, that's not reflected in any meaningful way. But you see companies like Nintendo that are going to, they are putting their whole back catalog, and this is sort of a long tail effect. And I didn't read all the details, but didn't Microsoft announce that they were going to put all the original Xbox games up for download as well? So, yeah. Do you have a question? No? Okay.
What do you think about titles we heard up the back about retro titles, but what about sequels where the actual original developers of the first title, the new IP, license out or the publishers say license it off to a new developer, say for example with Matrox Republic, where BioWare moved on to do Jade Empire, and we saw Obsidian coming in to try and clean up with the already structured engine and everything like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting situation, where one developer is creating a licensed IP and then they get shifted over to another. I mean, I don't know.
Are there still the same risks involved, do you imagine?
Wow.
Or is it already an internal piece within the development?
Yeah, but then maybe you sort of end up with these creative overheads or technical risk. I mean, that's part of the portability of licensed IP, and also this kind of lack of control, right? So did BioWare think that they were going to get that, or did they unload it because they didn't have bandwidth? Did they want it? Did they not want it? I mean, I just don't know what the situation is there. But that's that lack of control, where it's the licensor, it's the publisher that has authority, unless you have a really good lawyer that kind of puts in kind of first right of refusal type clause in your contract. You're pretty much screwed. Yeah.
I'm just interested in the quality aspects of external IP as opposed to internal IP. And if we go back to that slide that you showed of game rankings, what percentage of those top 10 titles are actually internal IP?
Internal to the industry, 18 of the... sorry, you meant this one?
Yeah.
18 of the 20 are internal IP as I
So
defined it.
technically a non-licensed product.
Correct.
So the quality and focus is more on internal IP. Quality is what the easiest thing.
Well, that would seem to be the case, that almost invariably any sort of top list of games, it's usually 9-to-1 in terms of internal IP versus something like a Madden or a Tony Hawk or whatever. Yeah, and that's also borne out in the sales data, right? Of the 100 SKUs that NPD gave me, 74 of them were internal IP, whereas only 24 of them were external licensed. Yeah.
I think we talked about publishers realizing the benefits of having a balanced